This is a US hospital bill for a knee replacement surgery in Riverside, California. This one costs $46,278. But at this same hospital, the actual price insurance pays for this exact same procedure ranges from just under $16,000 to over $100,000 depending on your insurance. Doesn't matter if it's the same surgery and same doctor, it could be a difference of over $85,000. But just 2 hours south, this is the listed and final price for a JCI accredited Hospital Angeles in Tijuana for the same surgery. $15,895. And it's that price every single time. $30,383 cheaper than our price. Last year, 1.2 million people crossed the border to seek medical care in Mexico, up from pre-pandemic levels of around 400,000. A lot of this has to do with the skyrocketing and very non-transparent prices at US hospitals, something a recent law was supposed to help fix. But while many hospitals in the United States are outright ignoring the law, business is booming in Mexico. This video will take an objective and straightforward look at the rise of Mexico's medical tourism and whether the price benefits actually outweigh the very real risks. Let's dive in. Before we look at the 6 places that 1.2 million people are flocking to in Mexico, including a place known now as Molar City, we need to understand what's driving demand. Basically, why does one bill cost $15,933 in Riverside and another one cost $101,527,000, even though it's the exact same surgery, maybe even done by the same doctor? Well, every US hospital has a secret menu called a charge master that lists every single item and service a hospital can bill you for. Surgery, scans, lab work, medications, plastic bag, tissues, you get it. But because hospitals get paid by insurance companies after they take care of you, these prices are usually wildly inflated. Let me give you a concrete example. Tylenol might cost 7 cents at CVS for one single pill, but it might show up on your hospital bill for over $50. I got a whole video on this. You could actually check it out in the description if that's something that interests you. But hospitals inflate charge master prices 5 to 10 times above what a box of tissues actually costs, so insurance companies can negotiate discounts off of a high starting point. And that's the part that makes it so difficult, because each insurance company and each hospital has to negotiate. They eventually arrive at different price points, and that's why there's so much variation among hospital bills. It's how one person pays just under $16,000 for a knee replacement and another one pays over $100,000. The one piece of good news is this information finally reached the ears of US regulators, who decided to do something about it. In 2021, they passed the Price Transparency Act to force hospitals to be more upfront about what they charge patients. Hospitals now legally must post their gross charges, cash prices, and prices they negotiate with insurance for each procedure and make sure that it's publicly available for patients to view online. So I can log in and download one. Here's an example of what one looks like, and here's another. If it looks like hieroglyphics or something only a data nerd would understand, that's because that's not far off. But here's the thing, many of them might not be able to understand it either, because reports have found that much of the data is misleading or misrepresented. And another report has found that less than 36% of hospitals are actually following the new transparency law to the letter. Why would hospitals do this? Well, during the first year that this act went into effect, if you ignored the law and got fined a maximum amount every single day, you'd owe the government less than what they charge for one very expensive procedure for one single patient. If that's a max penalty they have to deal with, why risk telling thousands of patients that they're potentially being overcharged? Just eat the fee. Since then though, regulators have actually increased the penalties to up to $2 million a year for large hospitals. But as of last year, only between 14 and 18 hospitals have been penalized since the law went into effect. Since the US government can't seem to make US hospitals play fair, many are taking matters into their own hand and heading down south. So what's the deal with Mexico? We know it's cheaper, but do those lower costs outweigh the risks? The Mexican government refers to medical treatment for foreigners as turismo médico, and it's an industry that they're actively trying to grow. And there's been 6 cities that have seen the most growth when it comes to patients. First, Los Algodones, known as Molar City, is a small town of roughly 5,500 people located directly across the border from Yuma, Mexico. Despite its size, it actually has over 350 dentists, meaning roughly 6% of the town's entire population are dental professionals who primarily serve Americans. And what makes this so attractive for many Americans is many of these dental clinics have their prices just listed right there on their website, and there's no big changes or surprises. Here's one. While dentistry accounts for about 60 to 70% of medical tourism industry in Mexico, Tijuana, located just south of San Diego, has become a hub for bariatric and cosmetic procedures. Patients who are denied coverage by US insurance companies often find that these surgeries cost roughly half of US prices. And to incentivize more people to do medical procedures in Mexico, the Mexican government actually created the Medical Fast Pass. While standard border wait times can take several hours, this pass allows medical tourists to return to the US in 15 to 30 minutes. Currently, about 10 to 15% of all Mexican medical tourism occurs in this specific region of Baja California. On the complete opposite side of the country in Quintana Roo, cities like Cancun and Playa del Carmen are marketing a luxury medical experience. And some US surgeons actually travel to Mexico to operate on Americans there. This model combines major surgery with resort-style recovery. And while I'm sure that this appeals to some, at least for me, this seems like it would defeat the purpose of saving money, but I don't know. The final and I think most important development in Mexico's Turismo Médico is taking place in Guadalajara and Monterrey. These are major metropolitan cities and they offer sophisticated facilities for complex procedures. Both cities have several JCI accredited hospitals which follow the same international standards as the top US medical centers. And Americans and Canadians are increasingly traveling here for heart surgery, orthopedic procedures, and cancer treatment. Now, one thing I found to be interesting is this price gap is now being utilized by some larger, riskier US corporations. For example, companies like Ashley Furniture have begun sending employees to Mexico for surgery. The financial incentive works like this. The company flies a US trained surgeon to a Mexican hospital and pays for the employee's surgery and travel. They then give the employee a $5,000 cash bonus for participating. Why would a company do this? Well, even after paying the surgeon triple their usual Medicare rate and giving the employee a tax-free check, the company still potentially saves millions by avoiding the inflated charge master and negotiated prices of US hospitals. And while this financial logic is sound, this loophole comes with significant risks that I don't think many patients are prepared for. Now, this probably needed to be said earlier, but this is not an endorsement. I'm not a medical doctor, and there are major risks to doing surgery in another country. The data suggests 3 major ones. The first one is personal safety. Now, I recognize this is the most common stereotype about Mexico. But while the majority of the 1.2 million people who cross the border do so without incident, there have been exceptions. In 2023, 4 Americans who drove into Matamoros for a cosmetic surgery got caught in a cartel shootout and kidnapped after being mistaken for drug smugglers. A tragedy that ended with 2 of them actually dying. So I know this is just one case, but to the 4 involved, this wasn't just some random statistic. The second risk involves medical complications and follow-up care. If a complication arises from a Mexican procedure, many US doctors are hesitant to provide treatment due to liability concerns. This can leave a patient in a medical gray zone with no clear path for corrective care. And the last risk is legal and financial complications. If malpractice occurs in the United States, you're not guaranteed to win, but there's a good chance that you get a significant financial settlement. In Mexico, though, a patient injured by a doctor typically must sue in the Mexican court system, where the process is difficult for foreigners and financial compensation can be significantly lower. Furthermore, US insurance companies often explicitly deny coverage for complications arising from elective foreign care. So a $30,000 savings can be immediately wiped out if you end up in a US emergency room getting a procedure that insurance won't cover. Nevertheless, the rise of Mexico's billion-dollar medical industry is a direct symptom of a US healthcare system that remains one of the most expensive and least transparent in the developed world. And despite the risks, if there's a variation at one hospital of $85,000 for the same procedure, many will consider crossing the border for medical care. If you found this video interesting and you'd like to see more like it in the future, please consider subscribing for more. This is Tyler Dutchover. Thanks for watching.